to make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comments.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with a panel of bloggers and opinion shapers. Joining me tonight, she is from New Zealand's largest feminist blog, The Hand Mirror, commentator, blogger and local board representative, Julie Fairey, and he is the editor of the Daily Blog Live, commentator and journalist, Selwyn Manning. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, the Labour Party leadership, who is winning? Issue 2, what does the asset sale referendum mean for the government? And Issue 3 tonight, is New Zealand doing enough for the Pacific? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with Issue 1. It's been a frantic week of policy lolly scrambling for the wannabe leaders of the Labour Party, with Robertson and Cunliffe trying to woo the membership with genuine left-wing ideas, while Shane Jones seems fixated on annoying as many female voters as humanly possible. Julie, where is Shane Jones going?
I don't think this is a serious play for the leadership. I don't think it ever was. I think this is about increasing his mana in the party to perhaps take on the deputy role, and certainly to ensure that he has a high enough list ranking or a safe enough seat next time to get back in.
Do you do that by annoying all the female voters?
I don't think so, but then as a woman I am obviously, not a red-blooded male who will think rationally and carefully about these things, and I will have emotional reactions.
Is this the sort of ploy that someone who wants to be deputy should be using?
I don't think so, but I have to say I'm really depressed by the number of people who've said he's doing really well, it's a great showing from him, and it's sort of like, actually, at the end of the day, he's still a bigot. And he's continued to be a bigot during this process. He hasn't apologised for any of the past stuff.
No.
In fact, he's been exacerbating it.
Yes.
And yet people are going, gosh, he's a lot better than we thought he was at this, political thing. So he's still sexist.
And also a little homophobic if you take his earlier comments with Grant Robertson into account. Yeah. Is this what one would expect from a high-ranking Labour Party politician?
I don't think we should expect it from any politician, actually. I think, we know we're less likely to the party we're least likely to get it from is the Greens. Party we're most likely to get it from is Active New Zealand First and National. But Labour, I'm really concerned that if Labour are serious about being a progressive force in politics, then they need to be good allies. And part of being good allies is not promoting someone who is obviously sexist and homophobic and has a really big problem with a whole lot of progressive social issues that matter to people who aren't straight white men.
If the Greens are going to be the third largest political party in Parliament, is it a wise decision to want to start fights with them every 3 seconds? Every 3 seconds.
And that's the other thing that really concerns me, is that it is about where we are at now, is that Labour has to show that they are the alternative heart of a government that is not led by John Key. And in order to do that, they need to show they can work with the Greens. And we've seen some good starts, the NZ Power stuff, that was a great start. And I just don't have any faith that Jones, either as a leader or as a senior politician in Labour, can actually grow that.
So when the mainstream media are going mental over the idea that Labour may go left and keep shrieking that Labour need to come back to the centre, what spooked them?
Cunliffe. David Cunliffe basically coming through with a cause-effect solution plan. In my mind, he's not specifically mapping out a great jolt to the left. He's actually addressing the problems that are starting to materialise all over this country for so many people. Those problems from manufacturers, exporters, those who are relying on jobs in those sectors. They have not been able to get a solution from this current government, and Cunliffe has actually been in there. He's thought through it, as has David Parker, and thought through how are we going to remedy these. The odd thing is that the OECD reports relating to the New Zealand economy that came out officially in June but is being put around at the moment give recommendations in there. Now, the OECD recommendations are very, very close to what David Cunliffe is actually recommending here.
Right. So this is not so radical.
There is a radical element there that he's saying enough of the free market hands-off government.
Yeah.
That's what we've suffered the consequences of for 30 years. He's saying no longer. You do need to regulate. You need government to be there as a party that is a brother to private and to the people, that is going to govern, not stand back, as David Longy once criticised the Bolger government of being a government that doesn't want to govern. That's where I see David coming through. I think if he got to be the leader, then we see the nuts and bolts of the plan. At the moment, they're aspirational goals and visions, and that's where I kind of read where it's been.
Julie, Grant's faction propped up a dead leader for 20 months. Why should he get a shot at leadership when he showed no leadership for at least 14 months, when it became glaringly obvious and apparent to everyone else Shearer just didn't have the chops for the game?
I think there's actually been a bit of reinvention of history here, because I still maintain that Shearer was the right choice at the time.
Yep.
I think circumstances have changed and he became the wrong choice, and he should have gone earlier than he has gone.
At what point did it become apparent that Shearer just couldn't do the job?
I think at least 6 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, or at least 6 months before he stepped down.
Right.
And I suspect for someone in Grant's situation, it's really a difficult thing to navigate. You are someone's deputy, you want to be loyal to them, you want to help them to get better, but also, as you say, they need the most effective leader they can get. So, I mean, the fact that it was Marion Street, who is known to be a Robertson supporter, who was about to put up the motion of no confidence, suggests that maybe Grant was doing more behind the scenes than might be immediately apparent.
I think what was indicative to that whole slide for Labour was when you could see the polls and the people engaging in the polls saying, we do not like this policy that the National-led government is putting out there, but we're not putting our support there for Labour.
Exactly.
Now there's a big flag around that.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
right.
that's when I guess a lot of us outside the party apparatus was starting to say the weather vane is moving, but you guys aren't capturing that
And
wind.
I think that with Shearer, he had the potential to
Yep.
grow. And,
Yep.
and the discussion about Cunliffe at the time was always, Cunliffe is now what he's going to be. Whereas Shearer was perceived as having potential to grow, and he didn't.
And look at Grant. I think Grant's campaign so far has been eroding the Beltway Grant type label.
I agree.
Either one of those two guys. There's a lot of people inside Labour that you could see would be saying, we're satisfied with this type of leader.
Exactly.
Now, with Grant, you can see he's more cautious in the foreign affairs areas. If the party at this stage wants to actually get in behind in New Zealand, a constituency that feels, we want New Zealand to stand for what it used to, we want it to be independent, then Grant's cautiousness might not go there, but Cunliffe seems to be actually getting into that space and prepared to lead with it.
How crucial will Jones's second preferences play here, and where are they likely to go?
Well, they're really important relating to, I was listening really carefully to what Julie was saying relating to Shane Jones and what he represents. I agree with pretty much all of it, really. I think what he is doing is he is representing that part in Labour that was once dominant, where the Backbone Club used to seduce that idea that it had this blokey kind of membership there, that it was almost like a New Zealand First type of component to the Labour broad tent, that there's the rainbow factions, there's the women, there's the feminist factions, there's the union factions, but there's this blokey stuff too.
And they're the true Labour membership as well. They're not a faction, which is just rubbish.
So that part, Jones is still speaking to that voice. But we all know that the Backbone Club's influence and its possession of influence within the Labour Party, it's run its course. Even people like Rodney Hyde, that outside obviously the Labour camp, but they know that too.
Final question to both of you: who's going to be the next leader of the Labour Party? Let's have the punt.
Well, I think there's a perception that it's Cunliffe's turn, but I also think that my reading of the membership is that they'd be happy with either one of them, and I think the caucus should go with whichever the membership chose.
Your punt?
Oh, it's a really hard one to pull, because my understanding of the inside party apparatus isn't as well thought through, put it that way. I get a sense that if the membership feels that out of these two leading candidates here, Cunliffe and Grant Robertson, Which one is going to actually take the economics plan to John Key in 2014? Who is going to win that message? Who has a better chance fighting on economic grounds? It is Cunliffe all the way.
Right.
If they are looking at 2014 for a leader that can knock National out, then my gut is saying they would go with Cunliffe, but I don't know whether membership is valuing that.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with our second issue tonight, John Key has attacked the $9 million for the asset sale referendum as a total waste of money. When you consider the $30 million to Rio Tinto, the $36 million for Team New Zealand boat racing, Sky City dirty deal, MediaWorks kickbacks, $1.7 billion to South Canterbury Finance, and over $2 billion in tax cuts, isn't Key's claim slightly disingenuous? Selwyn, corporate welfare good, money spent on exercising democracy bad. Is that the message here?
Well, it is, and kudos to David Parker and others in the Labor team in getting actually Bill English to accept a debate, you know, during question time, accept the premise really that corporate welfare was an issue. You saw that breakthrough a couple of weeks ago in the House. But yeah, no, there are major problems here. You know, getting back to the fundamental points here, that the government is resisting getting in behind, putting it to the people, giving them a chance to say asset sales yes or no, on the premise that it says, well, we fought this in the election in 2011. A lot of people have said that.
Yeah.
I think even people on your Citizen A program have said that before. But remember, a general election is fought on many different elements. That was a significant one, but it wasn't overall, and it seems, and I've always had a view that it was wrong to actually state that the government had a mandate on that issue because of the 2011 election.
Are the left just being sore losers? That's what National will say. They'll say, come on, we won this already.
Yeah, you lost, we won.
Yeah,
Eat that,
yeah, take that.
No, well, I actually think in terms of the issue about the mandate that Selwyn's raised, it was actually only just over 47% of voters who did vote for parties that supported asset sales.
Right.
Yeah, so actually, when they say we've got a mandate, over 50% of people voted for parties that didn't support asset sales, even though, as Selwyn points out, it was actually a matrix of issues for most people. They weren't voting on one thing.
Yep.
So I think the referendum, well done for getting across the line with the petition signatures. Anyone who's been involved in that kind of stuff knows how hard that is.
It's hard work from those, like the Green Party particularly stood up and actually took that. You know, others like the union movement were slow to get the numbers through. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is that it isn't necessarily a win for those that organise this. It's a win for the people that actually put their names in ink on the paper and said, we want to have a say on this specifically, and they should be honoured.
And I think also, I just wanted to acknowledge an amazing volunteer in my area in Mount Roskill, who is a Labour Party member, Stuart, who just collected literally thousands.
Right.
And, was gutted when they didn't make the first threshold, but got right back out there and collected thousands more.
Brought it home.
And so there've been there's individual stories in there of real passion, not just about asset sales, but about democracy and about giving people a say.
You know,
and
this is
that's
people
fantastic.
actually saying, we care and we want to have a say in this.
Exactly.
And it really, if Key tries to, stop this, and obviously they're going to go ahead from where he's positioning in the Parliament this week, well, his people positioning in the Parliament this week, but they do it at their folly. I would imagine that Labour, Greens, Mana, to a degree New Zealand First, are all thinking, stick where you are, National, because we're going to cane you in 2014.
What political advantage does this give the opposition parties going into next year? Is there a platform they could just consistently beat the government?
What it is it's another lever. It's another one of those, as Julie rightfully referred to it as, a matrix of issues in an election year that you can leverage in any areas that a government is estranged or walks out and there's a vacuum that creates. Right. Somebody politically in any science, political science notwithstanding, is going to occupy that vacuum. It's like at the moment, the national-led government has always made a big point. We've got farmers on side, we represent farmers, federated farmers are our most important, or one of the most important stakeholder groups. What about the share milkers?
Right.
Okay, they've been squeezed left, right and centre over the last 3 years. They've been squeezed. They're the ones who are having to pay more for what the OECD says are huge debt areas in agriculture. It's the share milkers that are paying for that, the high currency, not getting to the markets. No longer do you have MFAT's trade wing introducing them to the right markets at the right time.
Right.
The government disinvestment in those areas is significant. So there are cracks all over the place, and I think good leadership in the left will actually take it.
Julie, is this united effort the first real example of unified opposition at work here, and can it hold till the election?
Oh, I hope so. I think we have, I mean, I was a little bit disappointed in the way that the announcement was made about that the referendum was going to go ahead, that they had the numbers. I would have thought a united press conference or whatever, you know, get it fronted by Roy Reid from Grey Power and stuff.
Russell Norman broke the embargo, I
He
think.
did,
and
I
apologised.
don't think he did.
But
Get a little
there's also
excited.
been some really, you know, individually branded stuff on it as well. You know,
Yes.
the Greens have really pushed forward on, you know, we got this. Actually, it was a team effort.
That's right.
And Greens put an enormous amount into it.
Sure.
But they're not making any friends by saying we did this, because it was a team effort and it was always
Yep.
supposed to be that way.
Yep.
I think
So,
the impact on
you
the
know,
Green
that
Party
worries me.
activists was huge, and there was a lot from. I
Well,
mean,
many of them were paid, sure.
I was observing real resistance coming through with us saying, you know, we could be fighting other battles here on other frontiers, and we're here because our government, our caucus is saying we need to do this,
Right.
and they were wondering whether or not they were going to get a bang for their buck out of
Well, I
that.
think
And they
also
did?
there are a number
Well,
of
maybe
people
they have in the end.
in the Greens who have been ex-Alliance and remember what happened in the 90s when the Alliance tried to get up two referendums, one on health and one on education.
Huge
which
resource,
huge
exhaustion.
resource,
Yeah.
exhausted people and didn't get anywhere near the target.
Yeah.
But there might be a value in this.
Final question to both of you on this: should these citizen-initiated referendums be binding?
Oh, that's a really tricky one, because when you're talking about people's individual rights, then I don't think so, no. Tyranny of the majority, you know, the fact
That's
that the
right,
Swiss didn't
that's
give
right.
women the vote until the 1970s, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff there. But when it's on issues of policy and economics, I don't know, maybe we need to be more open to that. Personally, I guess the problem is that you pass a referendum that's completely at odds with the government's policy, and the asset sale stuff is absolutely essential to how they're going to pay for
Yeah, yeah.
basically
That's right.
operation of business as usual.
Well, they're
and
going
so-
to cough up on so many different things, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to spend the money over and over again. So if you cut them off at the knees by having a binding referendum, doesn't that make them a bit of a lame duck government potentially?
The fear of binding referendums when you see some crazy referendums that have come out, let's be honest, there have been a couple, is that the public seem to be very ill-informed on some issues and want to go tearing off down an alleyway. Do you want to bind the rest of the country to those?
I don't think we need to be too precious. I think a lot of the problems are around the phrases of the questions.
Yes.
Where the questions are actually engineered for an outcome. Now, get rid of that nonsense.
Yeah.
Where you've got pretty straight kind of indicative kind of questions there, then, you know, I think this is an interesting debate that could come up in an election year.
Right.
I mean, where do the parties sit on this? In my view, I say, let's have that debate. You know, citizens-initiated referendum that is binding. It's got a ring to it there, where people getting included in the discourse of politics.
But
is
the
required.
tyranny of the majority is always going to be able to hold back some of those big civil advancements, aren't they?
Yeah, and certainly the tyranny of executive office has held back the progress in this country on many, many junctures.
That's right. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. The Pacific Islands Forum is being held in the Marshall Islands, and Key is there pledging $5 million to low-lying islands for freshwater projects. But is New Zealand doing its best for the Pacific when Auckland is the largest Pacific island city in the world? Julie, the last time atmospheric carbon dioxide stood at 400 parts per million, more or less where we are today, sea levels were at least 20 metres higher. If this government give as much of a damn about our Pacific island whānau, wouldn't we be leading on climate change rather than a mere follower?
And a very slow follower.
Very
slow,
slow
reluctant
follower.
Who's been basically trying to fall further and further behind.
As much as it can.
I think that on the climate change issue, the message I've been hearing is that a lot of the Pacific Island nations are looking now not for research, but for actual practical projects that will help them to mitigate it. And New Zealand has a real role to play there. In terms of providing those the money for those projects, but also the expertise, working with communities about, you know, accepting that the sea level is probably going to rise. So actually, how do we work with you? How do we shift your villages? How do we invest in alternative forms of transport that don't rely on roads that go around the outside of your island?
Sure.
You know, there's a whole lot of stuff there that we could be doing that are actually practical projects rather than research, because we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
actually
And
get
it
on
is
and be
happening.
hands-on.
What,
Exactly.
what about the idea that we will have to, at some point in the future, look at having much of these islands relocated to New Zealand?
Well, it's already happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's about how do we do that in a way that enables people to move here without being alienated.
That's a really
Effectively.
important issue. I remember raising this as a question to Kevin Rudd and Helen Clark prior to them going across to Pacific Island Forum some years ago when they were both leaders. And it came down to at what stage and what kind of considerations have been there at government level to embrace the legal definitions of environmental or climate change refugee status.
Exactly.
Now, they both, Helen Clark, Rudd passed it to Helen Clark, and Helen Clark took a view, if I remember right at that time, where we will not do that, but we will put in place mechanisms through our immigration channels and our processes to play our part. But the big part here is New Zealand does have a responsibility in the Pacific, formally with the realm, what's referred to in these lofty circles as the realm of New Zealand, which includes obviously the Cooks, Tokelau most significantly, and Niue. But in Tokelau, I've been up there on the 3 atolls there, and the population on Nukunonu Atoll, okay, let's look at that one. In the middle of the atoll is a building called the David Longy Building, and it's the school building, right? When the big storms come, the severe cyclones, the ocean waves meet the lagoon waves, the island is underwater with the trees, you know, swinging above. Where do they go was the question I asked the guy, and he says, oh, New Zealand helped us build this building down there. It's a concrete building. Now, there's about 400 on that island. They cram into those concrete buildings that are up above and sit there literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean waiting for the storm to go. New Zealand needs to help in those areas relating to erosion, etc., but it also symbolically needs to lead the charge. This government is not representing our place in the Pacific. We are no longer a Pacific independent state. We are one that's aligned to the old countries, and that needs to change.
Well, let's talk about that. According to Winston Peters, our SIS have been working very closely with one particular Pacific partner, the military regime of Fiji. Is our relationship with America warping our Pacific values?
That's yet to be determined, but what we do know is that Peters is onto something here. Ratu Tavitamara is seen in many circles. He's in exile at the moment. He's a former lieutenant colonel in the Fijian Army Defence Forces. Now he's in exile in Tonga at the moment. He was coming to New Zealand backwards and forwards. There is a lot of talk that suggests that back there in Suva, those loyal to Bainimarama concocted a story where in New Zealand, the people that Tavitamara was meeting were planning to assassinate Bainimarama at some stage. Well, that's what the suggestion is. Was it or wasn't it? We're not in a position where we can say, but New Zealand's SIS, we knew at the time that there were NZ SIS that went to that dairy in Auckland here on that morning that Peters is referring to.
And the High Court has had to drop the case, haven't they?
Well, it's interesting. Once again, what we've seen is the police's intelligence wings working with the SIS here, and it seems every time where those demarcation lines are blurred, there are problems in the court.
Don't they? They go a little bit rogue.
We deserve better than that.
Final question here: should New Zealand be taking more of a leadership role within the Pacific? And if we are, what are we supposed to be doing?
And I agree with Selwyn that we are turning away from the Pacific and towards, you know, the old, what you referred to as the old countries. I would agree with that, and I think it's a real shame. I think we do have an obligation. We have an opportunity, and I think, you know, our own record on, say, gender equality, which is something we're supposed to be promoting. You know, we're supposed to be helping our Pacific neighbours to reach the Millennium Development Goals.
And the English want us to do that.
Yeah, and also...
They want to facilitate that because they can measure those goals. They can't in Africa. But New Zealand's not doing.
And also to look at the CEDAW stuff around the elimination of discrimination against women. But we're not even taking that stuff seriously in our own country. So how can we lead in the Pacific. We definitely do have an obligation, and actually, it's more than that. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a chance to do the right thing by people who actually have a lot of ties to New Zealand, who come back and forth.
Our DNA is shared.
Exactly,
You know,
and we should step up.
Yeah.
What should we be doing?
Oh, first off, we should actually be looking once again at actually getting in there and driving ahead with things where we say, we have got this, we can help. We can help, for example, at the UN level too, where UNDP, we've got a New Zealander who's the head of it, for goodness sake.
Why aren't we helping the Marshall Islands with their claim of nuclear contamination?
Marshall Islands is under the United States' kind of things, and New Zealand would be back there. But all the Marshall Islands is asking, because the Pacific Island Forum is on their soil, is to say, New Zealand, please start talking climate change. Do not go take your levels back to 1992 levels or whatever it is. Say that your aspirational goals are these at least. And John Key is saying, New Zealand can cut back its emissions. It won't make any difference to the sea levels in the Marshalls. Well, that's true, but it's all about showing leadership on issues of morality in the world.
It's a death of 1,000 cuts on climate change as well. Every little cut that we can heal
It's
or
such a
stop from
defeatist
happening,
attitude.
you know?
Let's wrap the show with a final word. Julie, your final word this weekend.
I wanted to talk about Suffrage Day a little bit, which is coming up in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be celebrating 120 years of women having the vote in New Zealand.
Awesome.
That's awesome, yes. But there's a whole lot of really not awesome stuff that's been happening for women, particularly under the current government, and there's absolutely no room for complacency. We've had a Minister of Social Welfare, Social Development, who herself enjoyed the advantages of the Training Incentive Allowance while she was on the DPB, who's cut it for other people. We're seeing some really punitive measures against beneficiaries who are, more likely to be women. And we also saw the abolishment of the pay equity unit within the Ministry of Women's Affairs. So on Suffrage Day, yes, let's celebrate 120 years of having the vote, but also let's not forget that there's a whole lot of stuff going on at the moment for women that actually sucks, and we need to do something about it.
Couldn't believe that YouTube took down the Blurred Lines parody.
Yeah.
That was just unbelievable.
Naked men? No, no, no. Naked women, bring it
that's
on.
Right, that's right. So, on your final word.
Yesterday, the government announced that it plans to put a pilot out there to put local government voting online. Once again, let's have that debate. If the government can come through with an online platform that says, we know 100% that this is secure, no one will be able to hack it and tamper with it, well, bring it on. But if it's about trying to get engagement and getting a better result of the proportion of people that are going to vote in local government, well, let's have that debate. Maybe it's time where we had our polling booths instead of postal votes. But until they come through with a secure system that cannot be manipulated like the Diebold voting machines in the United States, well then, I think they're really pushing it.
By the NSA as well, yeah. Thank you, Selwyn, thank you, Jolie. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. Just when you couldn't believe the Sky City deal was filthy enough, it's now getting a subsidy from TVNZ's lower dividend. Stephen Joyce just admitted in Parliament that he didn't even read all the papers for the deal, and the supposed extra jobs are inflated. If it was a dirty deal done dirt cheap, that would at least be fiscally responsible. The Sky City deal, however, is a dirty deal done bloody expensively and incompetently. I'm not sure what's worse, our Prime Minister pimping for a bloody casino, or Stephen Joyce admitting proudly in the debating chamber yesterday that he doesn't read all the reports. Not just for this decision, but for all the decisions he makes. This government is held together by snot and hope the public stay apathetic. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.